Welcome to the webinar regarding backdating sales invoices and credit notes. The agenda for today is to give you a brief introduction, and next I will explain what has been changed and how it will affect you as a user. And then I will show you which company setting you should be aware of regarding backdating sales invoices and credit notes. Lastly, I will have a quick demo in Rambase before we finish up with some questions or comments in the end. My name is Malene, and as mentioned, we will look at backdating sales invoices and sales credit notes. Note that this webinar will be recorded for training purposes. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask using the chat functionality or save them to the end of the session. I will also kindly ask you to mute yourself during the presentation and unmute by the end if you have any questions or comments. So, what has been changed is that the new feature allows users to manually backdate sales invoices and sales credit notes with status less than 4. In other words, before the documents are registered. Earlier, the sales invoice and credit note would have the date where it was registered to status 4, but now it will get the date where the invoice or credit note was entered to the system, which means status 1, unless you are actively changing the date before registration. The first thing you should be aware of as a user, as I previously mentioned, is that the default date will be when the sales invoice and credit note is entered to the system. That means if you are loading the sales invoices or credit notes into the system and leave them unregistered, it will have the date it was loaded into the system if you don't change it before registration. The second thing you should be aware of is that if you have a foreign currency on the invoice, the currency rate that will be used is accordingly to the invoice date. For example, if the invoice date is 1st of September, then it will use currency rate from the 1st of September as well. There is also a set of conditions you should be aware of. If the sales invoice has at least one item that is connected to a shipping invoice or sales order, then you are only allowed to set the date back to the date of the shipping invoice or sales order and not further back. And if the sales invoice has multiple shipping invoices or sales orders, then you are only allowed to change the date to the last shipping invoice or sales order. In other words, the date of the related document to the sales invoice or credit note is the earliest invoice date you can have. For example, if the related sales order has the date of 1st of September, then you cannot change the date on the invoice to 1st of August. Further, you cannot change the date to a period that is in status 6 or higher. For example, if the period 2021-07 is closed and in status 9, you cannot change the date to 1st of July. Lastly, there is a company setting where you can limit the number of days that you can backdate a sales invoice or credit note. If you don't want to allow backdating on sales invoices or credit notes, then you set this setting to 0. If you are exceeding the number of days allowed, you will get this error message. Date exceeds amount of days back allowed by company setting. You can find the company setting under module Finance and submodule Receivables. So let's move to Rambase for a quick demo. Here is a sales invoice in status 1, and as you can see, the date is the 20th of August, and if I register the sales invoice now, it will receive that date and not today as it did before. But I can also change the date to day, 2nd of September, like this, and then try to register the sales invoice. And as you can see, I successfully registered the sales invoice and it's in status 4. Let's look at another sales invoice. And let's change the date to the 1st of August. And then try to register the sales invoice. As you can see, I got the error message that states that the date exceeds amount of days back allowed by company setting, which in this case is set to 7 days. And as you can see, the sales invoice are still in status 1. So let's try to set the date back only 3 days. Like this. And then try to register the sales invoice and press OK. Then you can see that I successfully changed the date on the invoice and have registered the sales invoice. And if the sales invoice had a related document, such as shipping advice, a similar error message will appear if the invoice date is changed to an earlier date than the shipping advice date. And that was all I wanted to show you. Thank you for your time and have a nice day.